It is early April 1992. High up in the windows of a luxury hotel, a sniper adjusts his rifle, staring through the crosshairs at the street below. Down on the pavement, tens of thousands of people have flooded the central avenues of Sarajevo. They are singing, marching, shoulder to shoulder as Bosniaks, Serbs and Croats. But in less than 24 hours, they will be at war.
The war here, says a local leader, can start any day.
A month earlier, Bosnia declared its independence from Yugoslavia, and the waiting is over. Across the eastern borders, the first towns are already falling into violence. Now, word has spread that European and American leaders are about to formally recognize the new nation, and everyone on the streets knows what that means. A full-scale war could just be hours away. Determined to stop it, the massive crowd presses toward the abandoned halls of parliament. They have no idea that they are already in the crosshairs of the snipers above. This is the start of the Bosnian Civil War. For decades, Bosnia had been part of Yugoslavia, a socialist federation of 6 republics. But real power was never truly equal. It was heavily concentrated in Serbia, the largest republic. The Serbian president Milosevic fiercely resisted calls for independence inside these republics. Slovenia is the first to declare independence, and Croatia quickly follows. The Serbian president takes control of the shared Yugoslav military and resists the breakups with absolute force. In Croatia, a full-scale war erupts. By 1992, thousands of people are dead and hundreds of thousands are displaced. Now, the pressure shifts directly to Bosnia and Herzegovina. But while the other regions have clear ethnic majorities, in Bosnia the population is fundamentally split between Bosniaks, Serbs and Croats. And their opinion on the future of the republic differ greatly. It is now October 1991. Inside the Bosnian parliament, the political debate is taking a dark turn. The session is broadcast live on televisions across the country. The Bosnian Serb leader steps up to the podium.
Ovo je put na koji vi hoćete da izvedete Bosnu i Hercegovinu. Ista ona autostrada pakla i stradanja kojom su pošli Slovenija i Hrvatska.
He delivers a chilling, direct warning.
Nemojte da mislite da nećete odvesti Bosnu i Hercegovinu u pakao, a muslimanski narod možda u nestanak. Jer muslimanski narod ne može da se odbrani ako bude rat ovdje.
For the families watching at home, the atmosphere instantly shifts. His words are not just abstract policy, they are a physical threat.
Kako ćete vi spriječiti da svakoga ne ubija u Bosni i Hercegovini?
Bosnia's president is next.
Ovo što se radi danas, ovo ne služi na čast srpskog narodu. Ni ovaj način istupanja, ove prijetnje koje se iskazuju. Muslimanski narod neće nestati.
He's a Bosniak and a quiet intellectual.
Ja ipak želim da poručim građanima Bosne i Hercegovine, neka ne strahuju, do rata neće doći.
Across the country, millions watch in disbelief.
Prema tome, mirno spavajte.
For the first time, ordinary people hear their leaders openly discuss the possibility of war.
Ne treba se bojati, jer za tuču i za svađu trebaju dvoje.
Yet outside parliament, life largely continues. Across the country, people still share mixed apartment blocks, mixed schools and mixed marriages. Bosniaks, Serbs and Croats continue working, studying and living side by side. The hope is that politicians will eventually reach an agreement. But a friction is starting to take hold. Every day, the news reports grow more hostile. Propaganda spreads. The rhetoric from parliament begins to filter into daily conversations as people start watching the news more closely. An uneasiness begins to shadow ordinary life. Politicians are finding themselves increasingly in a deadlock. The path to independence has varied drastically across its republics. Slovenia was the first to break away, enduring only a brief 10-day conflict. Croatia followed, triggering a brutal full-scale war, while North Macedonia secured its sovereignty without any armed conflict. These different outcomes were driven by one critical factor: ethnic composition. While Slovenia and Macedonia were relatively homogeneous, Croatia had a large Serb minority. Bosnia, however, was even more ethnically diverse. Nationalist leaders in Serbia viewed Bosnia not as a sovereign neighbor, but as territory that had to be kept under Serbian control at any cost. The Bosnian government was making no progress. Its president turned to the people and scheduled a nationwide referendum on the question of independence. For many Bosnian Serbs, this was a terrifying prospect. Independence felt like a trap, a fear of being cut off from their families in Serbia and being reduced to a vulnerable minority. This anxiety was rooted in the dark, brutal history of the Second World War, where hundreds of thousands of Serbs had been murdered by Nazi-aligned forces. The generational trauma was deep and real. But nationalist politicians, like the Bosnian Serb leader, weaponized this fear. They flooded state television with warnings that history was going to repeat itself if Bosnia declared independence, transforming genuine grief into manufactured panic. The decision was made to have a referendum, but the Bosnian Serb leadership refused to participate, and in response, they proclaimed their own breakaway state, Republika Srpska. It is now February the 29th, and it is the first day of the referendum vote. In Bosnia's capital, the government had long operated from the two parliament buildings, but weeks earlier, the Bosnian Serb leadership had walked out and moved into a luxury hotel just across the street. They call on Serbs to boycott the referendum, but people turned out to vote. The next day, March 1st, this is the second and the final day of the vote. We're in Sarajevo's old town at a wedding. After the party, the procession moves through the cobbled streets of Bosnia's capital. The guests are singing, they're laughing, and they're waving a Serbian flag. The results of the vote will soon be known. A car that passes by the wedding procession spots the Serbian flag. They stop and turn around. Inside this car are four men that are led by a notorious local gangster, a Bosniak. They try to rip the Serbian flag, and as the situation is escalating, he pulls out a gun and he starts firing into the crowd. A man drops to the pavement, the father of the groom. Within hours, the news spread across the city. Armed men erect makeshift barricades that divide the city into zones. The city is fractured and chaotic. By morning, the official results are released. A landslide yes for independence. Serbian leaders now seize on the shooting as the ultimate propaganda tool. They say that this was not an isolated act. They say that this was proof of a coordinated existential assault against all Serbs that are currently living in Bosnia.
Mi smo ljudi, ne dajte da nas bandu, treba nas razdijelite, a na jednu stranu bandite, na jednu pošteni narod.
Panic spreads. The city transforms into a turf war. Barricades go up, roadblocks harden, and this spreads outward into the Bosnian countryside. The government declares independence, but the international response is still unknown. Will the United States recognize Bosnia's sovereignty? What about the European community? Politicians are deeply divided, but they must reach an agreement or Bosnia could go to war. Bosniak and Croat leaders are now operating from the parliament building and Serb leaders from the luxury hotel next door. But on the streets, there was much more unity. It is April the 5th, a month after independence was declared, when a demonstration was held. Tens of thousands of people marched shoulder to shoulder. They filled the avenues, forming a human shield between the warring political factions. In the upper floors of the Holiday Inn, looking down on the crowds below, snipers are getting into position. The sound was deafening. People scream. They seek cover. They try to understand what just happened.
Djevojka je ranjena od ozgo. Znaš šta su je bile zadnje reči? Ovo je Sarajevo. Ovo je Sarajevo. Ovo mi je najteži mjesec u životu.
The massive crowd presses toward the abandoned halls of parliament. The people take over the building, taking turns addressing the crowd. The president makes an appearance.
Vjerujem da tu Bosnu može samo narod spasiti. Ja dakle odavde, kao posljednji građanin, kao pripadnik tog naroda, pozivam ovaj narod da stane u odbranu Bosne.
When the crowd realizes where the shots originated, a faction goes into the hotel to hunt down the gunman, room by room. The Serb leadership that was working inside is forced to flee the city. But the capital city is surrounded, and the longest siege in modern warfare has just begun. It lasted for 3 brutal years. Across Bosnia, towns were systematically cleared of entire populations. Civilians were dragged from their homes and trapped in concentration camps.
And away from the camera, there were allegations of routine beatings and executions. Several prisoners told us of retaliatory killings. One instance in which they claimed 150 of their fellow prisoners had been killed following the death of 10 Serbian soldiers in a Muslim village.
Political power had become tied to territory, and territory had become tied to ethnicity. In this context, mixed communities had become political obstacles. To achieve their objectives, the warring factions deliberately targeted the demographic composition of the land itself. The anxiety and generational trauma among ordinary citizens was entirely genuine, deeply rooted in the history of past atrocities. But when that real fear was amplified and weaponized by political elites, it unleashed a devastating logic.